Hi everyone, it's me, and today I'm going to be trying to start a new series of reading some Sanders Sides of fanfics. Today I'm going to be reading Swords and Sorcerers, a Sanders Side saga by Swisskey. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Now let's get into the fic. Chapter 1, Yawning and YouTubers. And until next time, take it easy guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Peace out! Those happy oministic words rang out through the speakers to the ears of the young man named Thomas Sanders. Thomas had finally finished his latest YouTube submission. Watching his own face smile goofily back from his computer screen as he finished editing, the work was truly exhausting, and his eyes as strained as he had spent the last several hours poring over just as many hours of footage before consorting it into an online video that was a quarter of an hour long. The young man tilted his head back, tired yet content, rubbing his eyes before letting his fingers run up into the locks of magenta hair and letting out a squeaky, high-pitched yawn. He stretched along the back of his couch, feeling his back pop once or twice before leaning forward again and chancing a look at the clock, with a sensation of foreboding in his chest, seeing how long he was consumed by editing. He let out a groan. Ugh, I need to get to bed. Quickly saving his finished work and telling himself that he'd upload it first thing tomorrow, Thomas stood and stretched once more before closing his laptop with a satisfied little sigh. He laughed a little to himself, knowing it would probably be the early afternoon before he remembered he had told himself to upload it earlier. His eyes felt heavy. His eyes felt heavy. He was too tired to care. The sky and the street were, of course, dark outside. As he passed the window, his feet carrying his exhausted body through his apartment and turning off the lights, and headed up the stairs to his room, his mind mulling over the next day or so. He wondered how well his video would be received, if he had truly done the best job he could, and what video project to work on next. Thomas was a YouTuber, and quickly becoming quite a popular one, with a center series that seemed to catch the attention of millions of his viewers. He would stand in front of a camera and talk to himself, as many others would do in videos, about decimals in his life such as loss of motivation, or growing up, or fitting in. In truth, whether or not he chose to believe it or not, he was hailed among the online community as some things of wholesome self-growth. However, Thomas would solve these problems in no way other YouTubers truly dared to try, in a way no other YouTubers truly could. He would actually speak to himself, or rather the facets of his personality, directly. As in, he could conjure these facets to appear as people, out of thin air, to speak with them in a formal discussion, to work through whatever his present issue was. He originally believed that they were simply imaginary friends of his in his youth, a coping mechanism he would turn on when the world around him seemed too much to handle that day. Perhaps, as well, maybe his imagination was a bit more attentive to detail than most. It wasn't until his late teens, however, Thomas began to realize these sides of himself that he was conjuring and talking to seemed as real as he was, and that they had tangibility, physical forms that he could touch. In a case of particular facets of his personality, hug. Oddly enough, he was able to work through the shock of discovering by talking it over with the facets himself. That, and as he grew from an adult to his child, his four facets, or a side that swayed over much of his consciousness. The first was Patton, who was first conjured to embody Thomas's sense of right and wrong. While bearing Thomas's face like the other sides, he wore thick black glasses, and there were touches of gray out emitting the fuchsia and brown locks of hair. To Thomas's younger eyes, he was a classic father figure. His blue golf shirt and gray cardigan wrapped around his shoulders, telling him to help others in need, to always tell the truth, and to stand up for what is right even when it's not easy. As time wore on, though, Thomas became older. Patton was found being at the center of many of his deepest emotions, always there to cheer with Thomas through the fun times and to be a shoulder to cry on the not so fun times, but always ready with a corny joke. In truth, Patton was a contradiction in and of himself, as he was not only a moral father figure, but he was also the giddy inner child that outright refused to grow up. In his own words, Patton recognized life was short, so he might as well make it short and fantastic. Shortly after Patton, as must be the answer to temper emotions, was Logan, the avatar of logic within Thomas's mind. To see him, he seemed a perfect counterpart, a complete to Patton, with an equally thick pair of glasses, a sleek blue tie at the collar of his own black golf shirt. Logan always seemed to wear expressions ranging from cold calculated to puzzled curiosity to exasperated annoyance, the latter generally reserved for the deficit lack of common sense of the part of one other side, in addition to serving as something of mitigating force to some of the more fanciful thoughts floating in Thomas's head. Thomas also thrilled the discovery and context nigh ravaged thirst for knowledge throughout Thomas's life. There was always Logan in the center of his mind as he would read, driving the young man to read one more paragraph, which would turn to one more page, then one more chapter. For all the emotions, in Logan's own words, might be the bane of existence, there has always been one source of competing ground between him and Patton, a boundless sense of wonder. As Thomas would grow, his youth shaped fantasy stories and Disney musicals. It was inevitable that the facies of creativity would thrive within him, eventually taking the form of Prince Roman. Physically toned with a dazzling smile and perfectly groomed hair, Roman looked every bit the Disney prince he was created to envelop. Donning a crisp white jacket and golden embellishments with espielles and woven cord wrapped in a bright scarlet sash, a pompous diva more often than not, Roman always served as a driving force behind many of Thomas's creative exploits in singing and theater, behaving as something far more than a manifestation of creativity, but the embodiment of those more complex thoughts of self-expression, romance, as well. Well, Patton was Thomas's heart. It was clear that Roman was in the driver's seat when Thomas put his heart to something. With any creative endeavor, of course, comes the fear of failure, the what-if thinking, and regrets of everything could have been done a little bit better. And it is in those anxious thoughts that Virgil was given a form. Created by the sparks of fear in Thomas's youth, Virgil started his existence as a defense mechanism to protect his house, but eventually grew into the little storm or cloud on every clear horizon. Looking perpetually tired and mosey, even without his smudged, smoky eyeshadow and donning almost all black clothes, Virgil could easily fit the metaphor as he necessarily continued to butt heads with Roman, the dreamer, Logan, the voice of reason, and Patton, the internal optimist. It took years before the three other dominant sides truly saw the good that Virgil brought to Thomas, keeping him moving each day before the others could take over for whatever task they had set ahead of him. In essence, as Roman had begrudgingly put it to him one day, Virgil was the stage manager, and no show ever gets off the ground without someone truly doing the most important work behind the scenes. In all honesty, being the backstage guy was quite pleasing to Virgil, and being in the limelight himself always served to make him more anxious. Thomas blinked back from his musing day, surprised to find himself in his room as he had gone through his nightly routine completely on autopilot. Mentally exhausted from the day of editing, he padded over to the other side of his bed to sit down. A voice that sounded suspiciously like Patton's fatherly nugs telling him to change so he wasn't sleeping for the next couple of hours in the dirt of the day. Groaning as he stood back up, he shrugged off his clothes clumsily and warningly, pushing aside the more measured voice of Logan, telling him to put his dirty clothes in the basket. First thing in the morning, I'll put the clothes in the hamper, Thomas reasoned to himself as he turned off his bedside lamp and pulled himself under the covers. He sighed a little in delight as he nuzzled into the nest of sheets and blankets, purple hair already ruffled against the soft pillows as rest slowly began to overtake his body. Thomas sank further and further into relaxation before the taunting, gruffly voice of Virgil, stirring up inside his head, conjuring up an image from grade school where he wet his pants during his chorus concert. The image seemed to come out of nowhere, and Thomas himself let out a groan as he pulled the covers over his head. "Nope," Thomas said barely and quietly called out. "Not time for this. It's time for bed." "Just doing my job," Virgil seemed to respond before the room was quiet once again, and Thomas, uninterrupted this time, was able to finally close his eyes and feel the sweet embrace of sleep. Today was over. Tomorrow would be another day.